The wind carried the smell of fresh cassava and red earth as 10-year-old Zahra stood in the middle of her father's farm, gripping a cutlass twice the size of her tiny hands. Her arms, though young, were already firm from years of helping Baba plow soil and carry heavy baskets of yam. She didn't mind the hard work. In fact, she loved the open sky, the cool morning air, and the way her father smiled when she handed him a bunch of ripe plantains. But at school, Zahra was different. While other girls braided their hair and played skipping ropes, Zahra's muscles bulged beneath her sleeves. The boys noticed. The girls whispered, "Look at her arms. Is she a boy?" One shouted across the playground. Laughter echoed around her. Zahra's heart sank. After school, she dropped her bag and ran, barefoot, tears flying, straight to the edge of the farm where her father sat under the mango tree. He saw her before she spoke. "They laughed again," she whispered. Baba held her close. His hands were rough, but his hug was the softest place Zahra knew. "For me, you are my daughter," he said gently. "I see nothing wrong with you. Your strength is a gift, Zahra. One day, it will carry you through places even your tears cannot go." Zahra wiped her eyes, comforted, but deep down, she wondered, would the world ever see her as more than just a girl with muscles? Zahra grew with the soil. By 12, she was plowing alone. At 15, she could carry a sack of maize on each shoulder. Her body was strong, and her heart stronger. Baba always said she was the son he never had, but not because she wasn't enough as a girl. He meant it as praise. Together, they kept the farm alive. It wasn't much, some vegetables, cassava, yams, but it was honest work. Zahra loved the smell of freshly turned earth and the joy of seeing something grow. They had little money, but their evenings were rich. Baba would tell her stories about her late mother, who died when Zahra was just 5. She remembered only her scent and a song she used to hum at night. Zahra never asked for much. A good harvest, a kind smile, and her father's approval were enough. But even in their small village, people whispered. Some warned her Baba not to waste her by not sending her to the city for beauty and marriage. Others said she should hide her arms under long sleeves. But Baba always said, "Zahra is not a flower to be plucked. She's a tree, strong, rooted, and reaching." At school, Zahra focused on her books. Still, the laughter never stopped. Even teachers stared sometimes. But Zahra was no longer crying under mango trees. She walked home silently, her fists clenched, her chest tight, but her head held high. The farm gave her peace. Until the day it didn't. Zahra was 18 when Baba fell ill. It started as a small cough. "It's nothing," he said. But in 3 days, he stopped getting out of bed. Zahra boiled herbs, fetched water, and stayed by his side. But his skin grew pale. His voice faded. One morning, as the rooster crowed, she touched his hand, and it was cold. "Baba," she whispered. Silence. The birds still sang, the trees still swayed, but Zahra's world crumbled. She screamed until her voice broke. She buried him beneath the mango tree, next to where he always told stories. The villagers helped, some weeping softly. He had been a good man. After the burial, the house felt too quiet. The farm no longer smelled of hope. The sun was too hot. The nights were too dark. Zahra sat alone for days. No mother, no father, just the sound of wind brushing the tall grass. She couldn't bring herself to touch the cutlass again. The soil felt like ash in her hands. She had no money, no siblings, and no plan. All she had was strength, and one day she would need it. Zahra stood outside the farm gate, staring at the dusty road that led to the city. Her clothes were worn. Her heart was heavier than the sacks of cassava she used to carry. "I can't keep living here," she whispered to the wind. "There's nothing left." A friend from school told her there was work in the city. She sold the little maize she had and used the money to take a bus to Accra. The city was loud. Cars honked, people rushed, and buildings stretched high. Zahra felt small, but not weak. She slept in a shelter for a while, doing small jobs, carrying loads at the market, cleaning shops. But the money barely fed her. Then one day, she saw a woman driving a car with a green sticker. Uber. Zahra's eyes lit up. She asked questions, watched videos, saved money, took the test. She even begged to borrow a used phone and rented a small, beat-up car through a local Uber rental program. The day she passed her final registration, Zahra smiled genuinely for the first time in months. Now, she drove people around the city, quietly, safely. Some passengers stared at her arms. Some asked rude questions. But she didn't care. She was working. She was moving. She was surviving. It was a Thursday afternoon when Zahra's Uber app pinged. Pickup, Airport Terminal 3. Passenger, Stanley. Destination, East Legan Hills. She drove up and parked. A tall man in a navy blue suit, clean-shaven with thoughtful eyes, stepped into her car. His cologne was subtle, his watch expensive. He looked at her twice, first with curiosity, then with surprise. "You drive Uber?" he asked casually. Zahra smiled slightly. "Yes. Seatbelt, please." They drove through traffic. Stanley asked a few questions about how she started. Zahra gave short, polite answers. She didn't want pity, but something about the way he listened felt different. He wasn't mocking her. He wasn't staring. He was interested. When they arrived, Stanley handed her cash with a generous tip. "Thank you, miss." "Zahra," she said softly. "Well, Zahra," he replied. "You, unexpected. Maybe I'll see you again." As he walked away, Zahra didn't realize she was still holding her breath. She shook her head and laughed. "Rich people," she muttered. But something about Stanley's eyes stayed with her, and fate wasn't done writing their story yet. The next day, Zahra's phone buzzed again. "Pickup, Airport Terminal 3. Passenger, Stanley." She frowned slightly. Coincidence? She accepted the trip anyway and drove to the terminal. When Stanley saw her again, a small smirk played on his lips. "I was hoping it'd be you," he said, sliding into the seat. Zahra glanced at him through the mirror. "You booked specifically for me." He shrugged. "Not exactly. But I made sure to request at the same place and time. It worked." She raised a brow. "Most people prefer luxury cars." He chuckled. "Most people don't make me feel grounded." She didn't respond. The city moved around them. Horns, shouts, music. But inside the car, there was silence. Not awkward. Not tense. Just peaceful. "Do you always drive?" he asked. "Every day," she answered. "Morning to night." "And what did you do before this?" Zahra hesitated. "I was a farmer's daughter. My father died. I left the village." Stanley didn't interrupt. He listened. She stopped the car in front of his tall glass building. He paid again, this time more than before. "Zahra, would you ever consider driving for someone full-time? Private?" She blinked. "Like a personal driver?" "Yes. For me." Zahra didn't answer immediately. "Why me?" she asked. Stanley leaned against the car door. "Because you're not trying to impress anyone. You just, you're calm, disciplined. And honestly, I trust you already." Zahra crossed her arms. "You've met me twice." "I know. But sometimes, twice is enough." Zahra looked down at her hands. Her fingers were rough, her palms calloused. She didn't belong in places like his. She wasn't soft or elegant. "I'll think about it," she replied. He smiled. "Fair enough." Over the next few days, Zahra kept driving Uber. But her mind wasn't calm. The tip money Stanley gave was enough to cover her rental car for a week. She ate better, slept better. But what pulled at her heart wasn't the money. It was the fact that, for the first time, someone had seen her and wanted her as she was. By the end of the week, she texted him. I'll try the job. 1 week. No promises. He replied instantly. Deal. Zahra's first day as Stanley's driver was nerve-wracking. She wore her cleanest shirt, tied her hair neatly, and wiped the car dashboard twice. The gates to his mansion opened slowly. She drove in, heart racing. Stanley stepped out in a gray shirt and dark jeans. No suit today. You're early, he said. You're paying, she replied flatly. He laughed. The week went by in a blur. She drove him to meetings, charity events, high-end restaurants. She saw a world she never imagined. Soft leather chairs, sparkling lights, people who wore perfume that cost more than a car. Zahra didn't try to fit in. She drove, parked, waited. Stanley noticed. You never ask questions, he said one day. You never ask about my muscles, she replied dryly. He smiled. Touché. On the 7th day, as she dropped him off, he said quietly, I know it was only a week, but would you stay? Zahra looked at the sunset through the windshield. I'll stay, she said, but only if I can still be me. Stanley's voice was soft. Zahra, that's the only reason I asked. Being Stanley's driver came with attention. People noticed her now, not because of her muscles, but because of who she worked for. Some mistook her for security. Others assumed she was his bodyguard. A few whispered, why would he hire her? She looks like a bouncer, not a driver. She must be hiding something. Zahra heard it all, but she didn't flinch. Stanley never corrected them. He didn't have to. Every morning, he greeted her with a warm smile. Every evening, he thanked her sincerely. She began to dress better. Not fancy, just cleaner, neater. Stanley noticed. Once, he even bought her a simple navy blue blazer. Looks powerful, he said. She wore it the next day. One afternoon, while waiting in the car outside a hotel, a woman approached her window. You shouldn't be here, the woman said sharply. This is private property. Zahra leaned back calmly. I'm his driver. The woman narrowed her eyes. You. Stanley's. Before she could respond, Stanley appeared behind the woman. Is there a problem? He asked. The woman stuttered. I thought she was. She's with me, he said. Always. He got in the car without another word. Zahra's grip on the wheel softened slightly. That night, she smiled in the mirror for the first time in a long while. Stanley wasn't like the others. He didn't flirt. He didn't joke about her strength. He didn't act like he was doing her a favor. One evening, as they drove past the coast, he looked out the window and asked softly, What do you want, Zahra? She blinked. You mean now? No. In life. She didn't answer for a long time. I want a place of my own. Nothing big. Just clean. With a small garden maybe. Like the farm. I want to sleep without fear. I want to be free. He nodded slowly. No one's ever asked me that before, she added. Well, now someone has. She glanced at him through the mirror. His gaze was steady. Stanley, why do you care? He turned to her. Because strength like yours shouldn't be wasted on survival alone. Zahra didn't reply. But something inside her, something that had been buried since her father died, stirred quietly. Hope.it was a Friday evening when Stanley asked Zahra something unexpected. Would you come to dinner tonight? He said casually as she parked outside his home. She hesitated. Dinner with who? Me, he said. Just us. No pressure. No fancy dress code. Just food. And conversation. Zahra had never been invited to dinner by anyone like Stanley before. Her stomach tightened, but she nodded. All right, she said. But if you serve me snails, I'm walking out. He laughed. Fair enough. That night, she wore her cleanest jeans and a white shirt. Her hair was tied in a simple bun. She sat at his dining table, unsure where to place her hands. Stanley, dressed in a soft gray t-shirt, served her jollof rice and grilled chicken himself. "No chef tonight?" she asked. "I wanted it to be personal," he replied. They talked about farming, her father, her struggles in the city. He listened deeply. After dinner, as they sat under the stars on his balcony, Stanley said, "You know, Zahra, you've changed my idea of strength." She looked up. "How so?" "Because you carry pain without bitterness. And that is rare." The next few days were strange for Zahra. Her feelings confused her. She wasn't supposed to fall for someone like Stanley. He belonged to boardrooms and glass towers. She belonged to soil and steering wheels. But every time he spoke with kindness, every time he waited for her to speak instead of interrupting, every time he asked how she was really doing, it cracked something open inside her. One afternoon, as she parked the car after a long ride, Stanley noticed her silence. "What's on your mind?" he asked. Zahra clenched her jaw. "I've never been noticed. Not like this." Stanley waited. "My whole life, people either feared me or laughed at me. No one ever looked at me and saw something worth staying for." Stanley leaned forward gently. "I'm still here, Zahra." And in that moment, she realized she wasn't invisible anymore. But she was also scared, because to be seen was to be vulnerable. Stanley invited Zahra to a charity gala. She refused at first. "I don't belong in gowns and gold rooms." "Yes, you do," he insisted. "Not because of the dress, because of who you are." After much convincing, she agreed. He sent her a simple, elegant black dress. She stared at it for hours before putting it on. When she entered the gala hall, heads turned, not because of the dress, but because of her presence, her quiet strength, her proud posture. Stanley offered his arm. "You look powerful." Zahra smiled. "Good." Whispers followed them all evening. "Who is she? Is she his bodyguard or his girlfriend?" Zahra heard it all but didn't flinch. Not this time. Later, as they stood by the window overlooking the city, Stanley said, "Tonight, you stood taller than every chandelier in this room." She didn't speak, but her heart did something it hadn't done in years. It danced. It was raining the night Stanley finally said it. They had just finished a long ride back from a business trip. Zahra was quiet, watching the raindrops chase each other across the windshield. Stanley turned to her, eyes softer than ever. "Zahra, I like you. I mean it. Not out of pity. Not out of curiosity. I like your mind. Your strength. Your silence." Zahra stared at the road. "Say something," he whispered. "I don't know how," she admitted. He gently reached for her hand, his warmth steady. "You don't have to. Just don't run." She looked at him, her eyes filled with something between fear and hope. "I'm tired of running," she said. Their connection deepened after that night. Stanley didn't rush her. He never demanded labels. He simply showed up, every day, with kindness, laughter, and respect. Zahra smiled more now. She started journaling again. She cooked him farm-style meals. He taught her about business, investments, and reading financial papers. They were opposites, yet somehow they fit. Still, people whispered, "She's not like us." He's lowering his standards. "She's too strong, too rough." But Stanley never wavered. And Zahra, for once, didn't care what the world thought. Because for the first time in her life, someone chose her, and kept choosing her. One morning, Stanley called Zahra early. "My cousin, Vanessa, is in town. She's skeptical of us. I want you to meet her." Zahra raised an eyebrow. "Why do I feel like this is a setup?" He laughed nervously. Vanessa was polite, but cold. She asked sharp questions. "So, you were homeless. You drove Uber. And now, you're what? Dating my billionaire cousin." Zahra smiled calmly. "No, I'm just being myself. He's the one choosing to stay." Vanessa was silent. Later, Stanley said, She's difficult, but she respects strength. You handled her perfectly. Zahra shrugged. I've dealt with worse. Try surviving village gossip. They laughed, together, louder than they ever had. On Zahra's birthday, Stanley surprised her. He drove her back to her old village, to the land she once farmed. The place was quiet, overgrown, but still held memories. Why are we here? She asked. He handed her a document, the land deed. It's yours again. Legally. Fully. No strings. Zahra's hand trembled. I want you to have your roots back, Stanley said, so that no matter where life takes you, you'll always have a place that's yours. Zahra stared at the paper, then at the soil. Her father's voice echoed in her heart. For me, you are my daughter. I see nothing wrong with you. Tears filled her eyes. Thank you, she whispered. One day, Stanley offered her a new path. I want to start a foundation. For girls like you. For women who've been overlooked. Strong women with no platform. Will you lead it? Zahra's eyes widened. Me? Yes, you. Who better? Zahra took days to think. She visited shelters, spoke to other drivers, listened to women who had once been her. Then she returned to Stanley and said, I'll do it. But only if we build it from the ground. No fancy titles. Just real work. He nodded. That's exactly what I hoped you'd say. The foundation launched with her name, Zahra's Path, a program for women who had strength, but no support. Drivers, cleaners, single mothers, women who had been laughed at, pushed aside, or told they were too much. Zahra stood on the stage at the launch event, muscles still proud, voice calm. I was once homeless, she said. I was once mocked. I was once invisible. But strength is not something to hide. It's something to honor. The room stood in applause. Stanley stood in the back, eyes shining. That night, as they sat quietly on his balcony, he whispered, You're more than I ever dreamed. She rested her head on his shoulder. And I'm just getting started. Zahra stood once again under the mango tree where her father used to sit. This time, she wasn't crying. She was smiling. The land was now a training center for women. The farmhouse had been rebuilt. Flowers lined the path. Girls trained in self-defense. Others learned to drive. Zahra had gone from mocked to meaningful. From homeless to home. Stanley held her hand as they walked past the field. You still drive? He asked. She grinned. Once an Uber driver, always a driver. Then she looked at him. But now, I'm driving change. And as the sun set behind the tall trees, Zahra knew this wasn't just a story. It was her legacy. Thank you for watching Folktale by Marie Kai. Please like, subscribe and share.